The Foreign Minister says China has agreed to facilitate talks on jet fuel with Australian companies after meeting her Chinese counterpart in Beijing. There are signs that China's government may ease restrictions on fuel exports as it becomes more confident about its domestic supply. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts joins me now for more on this. Hi there, Stephen. So what has the Foreign Minister said about the commitments that China has made?
Well, look, in many senses, Mel, the details here are still pretty scant. The Foreign Minister, perhaps understandably, says she doesn't want to go into detail because there are commercial confidentialities that have to be respected. But look, the broad contours are fairly clear. It's now obvious the Chinese government is basically moving to facilitate discussions between Australian companies and Chinese state-owned oil companies who have basically been holding back large amounts of oil because of the uncertainty in the Middle East. Now, the exact shape of these talks isn't clear. The major players, we don't know for certain, but we can probably take a guess at some of them. And Senator Penny Wong says that this is basically a first step towards normalising the commercial relationships between jet fuel suppliers and their major customers in Australia in the wake of the chaos in the Middle East. Although she was also very quick to point out that this is only, quote, a first step. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
I can confirm, as I have, that the Chinese government is facilitating engagement with Australian businesses on jet fuel. This is an important step. However, it is the first step. One of the messages that Australia is articulating is the extent to which our energy security is shared, and the nature of the supply chains in the region are that energy supplies to us impact upon our capacity to provide other energy and other commodities to the region. So I think that the shared nature of energy security is a consistent message from Australia.
Stephen, can you explain to us the broader context that's happening here?
Yeah, China is a major exporter of diesel and jet fuel. It's a big supplier of jet fuel to Australia, but it's really pulled back and restricted exports in the wake of the chaos in the Middle East. Now, that's largely because it wants to protect its own domestic supplies. What's interesting is that the timing for Penny Wong and the Australian government could be quite good here because there are multiple reports that have been circulating, for example, from the Financial Times and from Reuters, that China's now more confident about its internal stocks and is therefore likely in May to resume something close to normal exports, although the exact quantum certainly isn't clear. Now, Penny Wong, perhaps unsurprisingly again, didn't want to be drawn on what Wang Yi said about that, but if the Chinese are moving towards normalising exports, and that will be a source of relief to Australia, and it means that the Australian companies that are now in these talks or will be in these talks with state-owned companies are pushing on a much more open door. Now, that's, of course, despite the huge global uncertainties that the market's still facing. So whilst China's feeling more confident about its internal supplies, it's worth remembering the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. There's still effectively what looks like a deadlock between the United States and Iran, and global oil prices are continuing to rise. So yes, the situation in China might be looking a little bit better, but there is still a huge amount of global uncertainty going forward, and that uncertainty, of course, then has real impacts for Australian companies as well.
And Stephen, what else do we know about what else was raised in this meeting between the two foreign ministers?
Well, look, we've only got a minute or so, Mel, so I can't go through everything, obviously. I'm told that the talks went on for quite a few hours and there were dozens of topics raised, or many topics raised. Just picking out two very quickly, the Foreign Minister was asked whether China raised Japan's growing security relationship with Australia. China has often been uneasy about Japan moving to dump its pacifist constitution and to build up much greater defence links with countries like Australia. And Penny Wong effectively confirmed that that was raised by the Chinese side, although we don't know in how much detail and how voluble they were about that. One other thing that's just popped out to me from the Chinese readout, which has just been issued, is that there's quite a pointed reference to the Pacific Islands. The Chinese have obviously taken the time during this meeting to try and press Australia or to try and convince Australia that its intentions in the Pacific are pure, saying that Australia should look at this matter, quote, objectively and rationally. The backstory to this, of course, or the backdrop, is this ongoing contest for influence we're seeing between Beijing and Australia inside the Pacific. So clearly China wants to press Australia on that. For its part, though, I don't think Australia will necessarily be convinced that Beijing's intentions are pure here. It remains convinced that China is after some sort of strategic or military foothold in the Pacific, and I don't think the argument from Wang Yi is necessarily going to convince Penny Wong any differently.